It was one of those evenings where the world felt like it had been dipped in amber, soft, golden light spilling through the cracks between my blinds, painting long stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat cross-legged on the couch with a lukewarm cup of tea cradled in my hands, staring blankly at the TV screen as some late-night talk show droned on in the background. My apartment wasn't much to look at, a modest studio tucked into the corner of a quiet neighborhood, but it suited me just fine. It was predictable, safe, and above all, mind, that's what I told myself anyway. Predictable and safe were good things when you'd spent most of your life feeling anything but. At 29, I thought I'd finally found a rhythm. Work during the day, quiet nights alone, weekends spent wandering bookstores or catching up on sleep. There was comfort in routine, even if it sometimes left me wondering whether I was living or simply existing. But tonight, something felt off. Not wrong, exactly, but unsettled, like an itch beneath my skin that I couldn't quite scratch. Maybe it was the weather. Spring always made me restless, its promise of renewal stirring something restless inside me. Or maybe it was the fact that I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since Dad's birthday dinner last month, and now she was coming over tomorrow for brunch. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, though whether it was excitement or dread, I couldn't say. She wasn't supposed to mean anything to me beyond the label stepmom. She'd married my dad 3 years ago, after Mom passed away, and while I'd never resented her for stepping into our lives, we'd also never been close. Our interactions were polite, cordial, and distant, the kind of relationship that existed only because it had to. And yet, I shook my head, trying to dislodge the thought before it could take root. This wasn't the time to let my mind wander there. Instead, I focused on the mundane details around me, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the way the steam from my tea curled lazily upward before dissipating into nothingness. Everything about this moment screamed normalcy, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Still, no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, her face kept floating back into my thoughts. Her smile, warm but guarded. The way she tilted her head slightly when she laughed, as if she were sharing a private joke with herself. Even now, hours before I'd see her again, I could feel the pull of her presence, an invisible thread tugging at something deep within me, urging me closer. I sighed and set the mug down on the coffee table, leaning back against the cushions. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and whatever this strange tension was, I'd have to face it then. For now, all I could do was wait. The next morning arrived too quickly, sunlight streaming through my bedroom window far earlier than I would have liked. I groaned and rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter around me, but the soft chime of my phone cut short any hope of lingering in bed. One glance at the screen confirmed what I already knew. Brunch with Dad and Claire. Claire. Just her name stirred something complicated in my chest, a mix of curiosity and unease that I didn't fully understand. I dragged myself out of bed and shuffled toward the shower, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of sleep. As I dressed, a simple blouse and jeans, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror and frowned. Was I nervous? No, that wasn't quite right. Anticipatory, maybe. Whatever it was, it unsettled me to be why the time I arrived at the cafe, they were already seated at a corner table near the window. Dad waved enthusiastically when he spotted me, his broad grin lighting up his face, while Claire offered a small, tentative smile. She looked beautiful today, as she always did, her dark hair pulled back into a loose bun, delicate gold earrings catching the light. There was something effortlessly elegant about her, a quiet confidence that drew people in without demanding attention. "Hey, kiddo," Dad called out as I approached, standing to pull out a chair for me. "We were starting to think you'd bailed on us." "Sorry," I muttered, sliding into the seat. Traffic was worse than I expected. He chuckled and patted my shoulder before turning back to his menu. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Claire watching me, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me, sharp and unexpected. I looked away quickly, focusing instead on the laminated menu in front of me. "So," Dad said after a beat, breaking the awkward silence. "What's new with you, sweetheart? Work's still keeping you busy?" "Yeah, pretty much. I replied, grateful for the distraction. Just the usual grind. How about you two? Anything exciting happening? Dad launched into a story about his latest golf outing, complete life updates flowing easily from him, as they always did. But I barely heard a word of it. My attention kept drifting back to Claire, who sat quietly beside him, sipping her coffee with practiced grace. Every so often, she'd nod or interject with a comment, her voice soft but steady. Watching her, I couldn't help but notice the subtle ways she carried herself, the way her fingers brushed absently against the rim of her cup, the slight tilt of her head as she listened intently to Dad's ramblings. Each movement seemed deliberate, measured, as though she were constantly aware of how others perceived her, and then there were her eyes. They lingered on me longer than necessary once or twice, her gaze piercing in a way that made my stomach twist. Was she studying me? Trying to figure something out? Or was I imagining things entirely? As the meal progressed, I found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable under her scrutiny. It wasn't overt, nothing anyone else would pick up on, but I felt it nonetheless, like a weight pressing gently against my chest. By the time dessert arrived, I was practically squirming in my seat, desperate for an excuse to leave. You okay? Claire asked suddenly, her voice low enough that only I could hear. Her question caught me off guard, and I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Fine, I mumbled, forcing a smile. Why wouldn't I be? She shrugged, her lips curving into a faint smirk. You just seem distracted. That's all. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Instead, I dropped my gaze to my plate, cheeks burning. What was happening here? Why did every interaction with her feel like walking a tightrope, each step fraught with danger and possibility? When the check finally came, I practically leapt out of my seat, eager to escape the suffocating intimacy of the moment. Thanks for brunch, I said hurriedly, grabbing my coat. I should probably get going. Already? Dad asked, disappointment flickering across his face. You sure you can't stay a little longer? I've got stuff to do. I lied, avoiding Claire's knowing stare. Rain check. He sighed but nodded, giving me another quick hug before letting me go. Claire followed me to the door, falling into step beside me as I made my way outside. We walked in silence for a few paces, the cool breeze ruffling my hair, until she stopped abruptly. Wait, she said softly, reaching out to touch my arm. The contact startled me, and I turned to face her, heart pounding. What is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, she didn't answer. She just stood there, searching my face with those piercing eyes, as though trying to decipher some hidden truth buried beneath the surface. Then, slowly, she leaned in closer, her breath warm against my ear. You're not fine, she murmured. But don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Before I could process her words, or the implications behind them, she stepped back, offering a small, enigmatic smile before turning and heading back toward the cafe. I watched her go, rooted to the spot, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, Claire's voice whispered in my mind, You're not fine, but don't worry, I won't tell anyone. It wasn't just the words themselves that haunted me. It was the way she'd said them, so soft and deliberate, like a secret shared between conspirators. Or lovers. I rolled onto my side, staring at the faint outline of my bedroom door in the darkness. What had she meant? Was it pity? Curiosity? Something else entirely? My chest tightened as I replayed the moment again and again. The brush of her fingers against my arm, the warmth of her breath against my ear, the weight of her gaze holding mine for just a fraction longer than necessary. And then there was the thrill, a sharp, electric jolt that had coursed through me when she leaned in close. That part terrified me most of all, because it wasn't fear I felt. It was something far more dangerous. Desire. But how could I want this? How could I even entertain such thoughts about her? She was my stepmother, married to my father, someone who existed firmly within the boundaries of family obligation. These feelings weren't just inappropriate, they were impossible. Yet no matter how many times I told myself to push them away, they lingered, stubborn and unyielding, like weeds growing through cracks in concrete. By morning, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the water run cold in an attempt to shock some clarity into my foggy brain. It didn't work. If anything, standing under the icy stream only made everything feel sharper. The ache in my chest, the restless energy humming beneath my skin, the relentless loop of questions spinning in my head. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel with damp hair clinging to my shoulders, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text notification lit up the screen, and my heart skipped a beat before I even saw who it was from. Claire. Hope you got home okay last night. My stomach flipped. Of course, she'd text me. Why wouldn't she? It was polite. Normal. Except nothing about this situation felt normal. Not the way she'd looked at me, not the cryptic comment she'd left me with, and certainly not the fact that my pulse quickened every time I thought about her name. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard. What was I supposed to say? Yeah. Thanks, see you later? Too casual. I'm fine. Thanks for asking? Too distant. Before I could overthink it further, I typed out a simple reply me. Got home safe. Thanks. Brunch was nice, IT was neutral enough, vague enough to avoid revealing anything I wasn't ready to confront. But almost immediately after hitting send, I regretted it. Nice? Really? That was the best I could come up with. Her response came quickly, as if she'd been waiting for it. Claire. Glad to hear it. We should do it again soon. The suggestion hit me like a punch to the gut. Do it again? As in brunch? Or something else? Her message was infuriatingly ambiguous, leaving just enough room for interpretation to drive me mad. Me? Sure. Sounds good. I cringed at my own reply. Pathetic. Weak. But what else could I say? Anything more would open doors I wasn't prepared to walk through yet. Still, as I set the phone down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly what she was doing, teasing me, testing me, pushing me closer to the edge, without ever crossing it herself. The days that followed passed in a blur of routine and restless anticipation. Work provided a welcome distraction during the daylight hours, but nights were harder. Alone in my apartment, the walls seemed to close in around me, amplifying every stray thought until they became deafening. I found myself analyzing every interaction we'd ever had, searching for clues I might have missed, moments where she'd hinted at something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. There was the time she'd caught me staring at her across the dinner table last summer, her lips curving into a knowing smile before she turned away. Or the way she always seemed to find excuses to touch me lightly, a hand on my shoulder, a brush of fingertips when passing the salt. At the time, I dismissed them as harmless gestures, friendly even. Now, though, they took on new meaning, each one fueling the fire burning low in my belly. And then there was Dad. Sweet, oblivious Dad, who adored her with a kind of earnest devotion that made guilt twist painfully in my chest. He trusted her completely, trusted us both. How could I betray him like this? How could I even consider it? But betrayal implied intent, and I wasn't sure I had any control over these feelings. They bubbled up unbidden, catching me off guard in quiet moments when I least expected it. Like now, sitting on the couch with a book I couldn't focus on, my mind drifting back to the curve of her neck, the sound of her laugh, the scent of her perfume lingering faintly in the air long after she'd left her room. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to banish the image, but it only grew clearer. Frustrated, I tossed the book aside and stood, pacing the length of the living room. Maybe fresh air would help. Grabbing my coat, I stepped outside, letting the cool evening breeze wash over me as I wandered aimlessly down the street. The neighborhood was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Couples strolled hand in hand, their laughter carrying faintly on the wind. Watching them, I felt a pang of longing so sharp it nearly brought tears to my eyes. What would it be like, I wondered, to hold someone like that? To let yourself fall completely, without fear or hesitation. But falling wasn't the problem. It was landing. And I already knew where I'd end up if I let myself go too far.
Broken. Lost.
Destroyed, a sudden vibration in my pocket startled me out of my thoughts. Pulling out my phone, I saw another text from Claire. Claire, are you avoiding me? My breath hitched. Avoiding her? Was it that obvious? I hadn't replied to her last message beyond our brief exchange about brunch, and now guilt gnawed at me for ignoring her. But responding felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice that might crack at any moment. Still, I couldn't ignore her forever. No, just busy with work stuff. IT wasn't entirely a lie. I had been buried in deadlines lately, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She didn't need to know that. Her reply came almost instantly. Claire, work can wait. Let's grab coffee tomorrow. Just you asked. My heart stuttered. Just us. The phrase echoed in my mind, sending a shiver racing down my spine. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. There was no hiding behind Dad, or pretending this was just a casual family outing. If I said yes, there would be no turning back. Okay. The word felt heavy as it left my fingers, sealing my fate with a single syllable. For better or worse, I was committed now. Tomorrow, I would face her alone, and whatever happened next, I'd have no one to blame but myself. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened rain. It matched my mood perfectly, restless, uncertain, and tinged with a quiet dread. I woke earlier than usual, unable to shake the knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. Coffee felt like a necessity rather than a choice, so I brewed an extra strong pot and sipped it slowly as I stared out the window at the empty street below. Just us. Those two words had looped endlessly in my mind since last night, each repetition carving deeper into my resolve, or lack thereof. What did she want from me? Was this some kind of test? A chance for her to figure me out, to see how far I'd let her push before I pushed back? Or was it something else entirely? A confession, maybe, or an admission of her own feelings? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic coursing through me. If she felt even half of what I did, if she looked at me the way I sometimes caught myself looking at her, then tomorrow wouldn't just be coffee. It would be a reckoning. But what scared me most wasn't the possibility of rejection. It was the opposite. What if she leaned across the table and kissed me? What if she took my hand and told me everything I'd been too afraid to admit to myself? Could I handle that? More importantly, could I live with the consequences? I shook my head, trying to dislodge the images forming in my mind. This wasn't helping. Overthinking never helped. Instead, I forced myself to focus on the mundane details of getting ready, brushing my teeth, pulling on jeans and a sweater, tying my hair back into a messy bun. Each action grounded me slightly, pulling me away from the swirling chaos in my head. By the time I left the apartment, the rain had started, a light drizzle that clung to my skin and dampened the sidewalks. I walked briskly toward the cafe where we'd agreed to meet, clutching my umbrella tightly despite its ineffectiveness against the wind. My heart pounded with every step, anticipation building like static electricity in the air. When I arrived, she was already there, seated at a small table near the window. She looked up as the door chimed, her eyes locking onto mine immediately. For a moment, neither of us moved. We simply stood frozen, staring at each other across the room like strangers meeting for the first time. Then, slowly, she smiled, and the tension eased just enough for me to breathe again. "Hey," she said softly as I approached, her voice warm but tinged with something unreadable. Nervousness? Excitement? I couldn't tell. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. Up close, she looked different somehow, softer, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was loose today, falling in waves around her shoulders, and she wore minimal makeup, letting her natural beauty shine through. She was stunning, breathtakingly so, and for a second, I forgot how to speak. "You look tired," she observed after a beat, tilting her head slightly as she studied me. "Everything okay?" Her question caught me off guard. Of course I looked tired. I hadn't slept properly in days, but hearing her say it aloud made it feel heavier, more real. "Yeah, just work stuff," I lied, forcing a smile. "Nothing major." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press either. Instead, she reached for her cup of tea, wrapping her hands around it like it might anchor her to the moment. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." Her words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I wasn't sure how to interpret. Did she mean it literally, just commenting on my presence? Or was there something deeper beneath the surface? I wanted to ask, to pry open the cracks in her carefully constructed facade and see what lay hidden inside. But I didn't dare, so I began, searching for something neutral to say. "How's Dad doing?" "Still obsessed with his golf game." She laughed lightly, the sound musical and genuine. "Oh, absolutely. He talks about it constantly. You'd think he was training for the Masters instead of playing weekend rounds with his buddies." I chuckled, grateful for the reprieve from the weighty silence. Talking about Dad felt safe, familiar. It gave us both something to focus on besides the unspoken tension simmering just below the surface. "He's always been like that," I said, relaxing slightly. "Even when Mom was alive, he'd spend hours watching tournaments on TV. She used to joke that golf was his true love." Claire's expression softened, nostalgia flickering across her features. "He mentioned that once. Said she used to tease him mercilessly about it." "She did," I confirmed, smiling faintly at the memory. "But she loved him anyway. They balanced each other out, you know? Like yin and yang." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The comparison lingered uncomfortably between us, casting a shadow over the conversation. Claire shifted in her seat, her fingers tracing absent patterns along the rim of her teacup. "That must have been nice," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "Having someone who understood you so completely." "It was," I admitted, my throat tightening unexpectedly. "But losing her, it changed everything. For both of us." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the table. "I can't imagine what that was like for either of you. Losing someone you love so suddenly." Her voice trailed off, and I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. It surprised me, catching me off guard. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never really considered what it must have been like for her to step into our lives after Mom's death. To marry a grieving widower and try to fill a role that could never truly be filled. Had she ever felt like an outsider? Like she didn't belong? "I'm sorry," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "I don't think I ever thanked you for being there. For him. For us." Her head snapped up, surprise flashing across her face. "You don't have to thank me," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because I care about him. About both of you." Her words struck a chord deep within me, resonating in ways I wasn't prepared for. Care. That simple, four-letter word carried so much weight, so many implications. Did she mean it casually like a friend or family member might? Or was there something more behind it? Something she wasn't ready to admit yet. Before I could dwell on it further, the barista called my name, interrupting the moment. I stood abruptly, grateful for the excuse to break eye contact and collect myself. When I returned with my coffee, the atmosphere between us had shifted slightly, lighter but no less charged. "You know," Claire said as I sat back down, her tone teasing now, "you're easier to talk to when it's just the two of us. No distractions." I raised an eyebrow, feigning nonchalance. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It is," she replied, her lips curving into a playful smirk. "Though I suppose it depends on whether you take it that way." Her flirtation was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt of heat racing through me nonetheless. I swallowed hard, gripping my cup tighter to steady my trembling hands. "Well, maybe you should distract me less often," I shot back, surprising myself with my boldness. "Then we wouldn't have this problem." Her laughter bubbled up again, rich and warm, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. It was just her and me, suspended in this tiny pocket of time where nothing else mattered. Where guilt and fear and consequences didn't exist. But they did exist, lurking just beyond the edges of our fragile bubble. And sooner or later, reality would come crashing back. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation ebbed and flowed naturally, shifting from light-hearted banter to moments of quiet introspection. We talked about books, movies, places we'd traveled or wanted to travel, and somewhere along the way, I realized I was enjoying myself. Truly enjoying myself, in a way I hadn't in years. And yet, beneath the surface, the tension remained, simmering quietly like embers waiting to ignite. Every glance, every touch, every shared laugh felt charged with potential energy, pulling us closer to something neither of us was ready to name. Eventually, the rain picked up outside, tapping insistently against the windows and signaling the end of our impromptu date. Reluctantly, we gathered our things and stepped out into the storm, huddling under my umbrella as we made our way toward the subway station. "I had fun today," Claire said as we reached the entrance, her voice soft but sincere. "We should do it again sometime." My heart skipped a beat. Do it again. The phrase echoed in my mind, carrying the same weight it had the first time she'd said it. Only this time, I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "We should." For a moment, neither of us moved. We stood there, inches apart, the rain soaking through our clothes and mingling with the warmth radiating between us. And then, without warning, she leaned in, closing the distance between us. Her lips brushed mine gently, hesitantly, like a question rather than a statement. My breath hitched, and for a split second, I froze, unsure whether to pull away or lean in. But before I could decide, she pulled back, her cheeks flushed and her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I'm sorry," she whispered, taking a step back. "I shouldn't have." "No," I interrupted, reaching out to grab her hand. "Don't apologize." Our fingers intertwined instinctively, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. Her pulse raced beneath my touch, mirroring my own erratic heartbeat. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. In that moment, everything we'd been holding back spilled over, raw and unfiltered and undeniable. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the pavement in a steady rhythm that drowned out the sounds of the city around us. It was as if the world had narrowed to just this moment, this fragile, trembling connection between us. Her hand was still clasped tightly in mine, her skin warm despite the chill seeping through our soaked clothes. Neither of us moved. We simply stood there, suspended in the storm, staring at each other like two people who'd stumbled upon something they weren't sure how to handle. "I shouldn't have done that," Claire murmured again, her voice barely audible over the rain. But her eyes told a different story, one of longing and fear, of wanting desperately to believe this could be real while knowing it might destroy everything. "Why did you?" asked softly, my own voice trembling. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my throat, every beat urging me to pull away, to run, to protect myself from whatever lay ahead. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not when she looked at me like that. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to where our hands were intertwined before meeting mine again. "Because I've wanted to for so long," she admitted, her words spilling out in a rush, like she couldn't hold them back anymore. "And because I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way about you." Her confession hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping for breath. This wasn't what I'd expected. Not here, not now, not with the rain pouring down around us and the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on my chest. And yet, hearing her say it aloud made something inside me crack open, releasing emotions I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself they didn't exist. "You're married," I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "To my dad." "I know," she said quickly, her grip tightening on my hand as if she thought I might try to pull away. "I know. And I hate myself for even thinking about this, for letting it get this far. But I can't stop, no matter how hard I try. You're all I think about." Her vulnerability undid me. She wasn't supposed to look like this. Fragile, uncertain, scared. Claire was always so composed, so perfectly put together, like nothing could ever rattle her. Seeing her stripped bare like this, exposing the cracks beneath her polished exterior, made my resolve waver dangerously. "And what happens next?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "What happens when he finds out? When everyone finds out?" I don't know, she admitted, tears mingling with the raindrops streaming down her face. All I know is that I can't keep living like this, pretending I don't care about you, pretending I don't want you. It's killing me. Her honesty shattered the last of my defenses. I wanted to tell her no, to push her away and walk off into the rain alone, to do the right thing for once in my life. But instead, I stepped closer, closing the distance between us until our bodies were nearly touching. Then don't, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't pretend anymore. For a moment, she just stared at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation or regret. Then, slowly, she leaned in again, her lips finding mine in a kiss that was anything but hesitant this time. It was desperate, hungry, filled with all the pent-up longing and guilt and desire we'd been carrying for months, or maybe years. My free hand came up to cup her cheek, pulling her closer as the rain soaked through my sweater and chilled my skin. None of it mattered. Nothing else existed except her. The taste of her lips, the warmth of her body against mine, the way she clung to me like I was the only thing keeping her grounded. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against each other as we tried to catch our breath. The reality of what we'd just done crashed over me in waves, threatening to drag me under. We were playing with fire, and sooner or later, we'd both get burned. But standing there in the rain, with her arms wrapped around me and her heartbeat pounding in sync with mine, I couldn't bring myself to care. We can't go back now, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. Once we cross this line, there's no turning back. I know, she replied, her voice steady despite the tears still streaming down her face. But I don't want to go back. I want to see where this takes us, even if it scares me. Her words echoed my own thoughts so perfectly that it sent a shiver racing down my spine. Scared didn't begin to cover it. Terrified was closer to the truth. But fear wasn't enough to stop me, not when she looked at me like I was the center of her universe, like I was worth risking everything for. We ended up taking a cab back to her apartment, though neither of us spoke much during the ride. The tension between us was palpable, crackling like electricity in the cramped space of the car. Every accidental brush of our knees, every lingering glance, felt charged with possibility, making the short trip feel impossibly long. When we arrived, she paid the driver and led me inside, her hand never leaving mine. The building was quiet, the kind of upscale complex where neighbors rarely interacted and footsteps echoed faintly in the hallways. Her apartment was on the top floor, a sleek modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Normally, I would have taken a moment to appreciate the architecture or the tasteful decor, but tonight, none of that registered. All I could focus on was her. The way she moved, the way she looked at me, the way her presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. She closed the door behind us, locking it with a soft click that sounded deafening in the silence. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other across the threshold, the enormity of what we were about to do hanging heavy in the air. This is insane, I said finally, breaking the spell. We shouldn't be doing this. No, we shouldn't, she agreed, stepping closer until there was barely any space between us. But I don't care anymore. Do you? I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She reached out, brushing a strand of damp hair from my face, her touch sending sparks racing across my skin. Good, she whispered, pulling me into another kiss. This one was slower, deeper, filled with a kind of tenderness that made my knees weak. Her fingers tangled in my hair as she guided me backward toward the couch, lowering me onto the cushions without breaking contact. Every movement felt deliberate, measured, like she was savoring every second of this forbidden moment. Her hands roamed over my body, tracing lines along my collarbone, down my arms, across my waist. Each touch sent waves of heat coursing through me, melting away the last of my resistance. I tugged at the hem of her shirt, needing to feel her skin against mine, and she obliged, pulling it off in one fluid motion before leaning back and to claim my lips again. It was intoxicating. The way she tasted, the way she smelled, the way her body fit against mine like it had been made for me. Guilt and fear lingered at the edges of my consciousness, whispering warnings I couldn't afford to listen to right now. All that mattered was her, here, now, in this stolen slice of time where nothing else existed. As we sank further into the couch, shedding layers of clothing and inhibition, I let myself believe, for just a little while, that maybe this could work. Maybe we could find a way to make sense of the chaos swirling around us. Or maybe we'd burn brightly for a few fleeting moments before collapsing into ashes. Either way, I decided it would be worth it.